The Chargers' former GM Tom Telesco is being hired by the Raiders. And this is exactly what I wanted as a Chargers fan. So let's go over what the Raiders should be looking forward to with Tom Telesco as their GM now as a Chargers fan. And make sure to like and subscribe if you do enjoy this content, man. This news is the most anticipated news that I've been wanting in this offseason. So as a Chargers fan, this is the most exciting news from the NFL offseason so far. And it's only going to be topped by that Jim Harbaugh signing when it happens. But as soon as I saw Tom Telesco was interviewing for the Raiders GM job, I had my hopes up, man, that they would actually fall for it and hire him. Tom Telesco, he's a very good talker. We've seen him at the media day. We've seen him at draft have some success early on in the rounds, and we'll get to that. But he actually fooled Mark Davis, and he is hired now with Antonio Pierce, who used to be the interim head coach for the Raiders. That is going to be a good pairing, I think, for a Chargers fan going into that new Raiders era. It's going to have a lot of success for the Chargers against the Raiders. I am hoping for that. That's why I wanted Tom Telesco as GM of the Raiders. But let's just get the good out of the way with Tom Telesco, okay? Let's just stick with Tommy here, Tommy T. There are only really two things that he does very well, and that's what I'll admit, okay? He is good at drafting in the first two rounds, specifically the first round, where he has hit on a lot of great players. Like, we all know Joey Bosa. Hunter Henry was really good. Justin Herbert, obviously. Dude, Derwin James was really good. And Rashawn Slater, premier left tackle in the NFL. But the Chargers had a lot of star power on their team because of Tom Telesco. And the narrative around the Chargers often was that they needed a good head coach for once, because Tom Telesco was doing such a great job of getting talent on the Chargers, and they just kept underperforming because the coaching was holding them back. And if you just look at the names that I said, like Joey Bosa, Justin Herbert, the guys that were drafted early in the draft, it looks like the Chargers are a star-studded team with loads of talent, but that just wasn't the case in reality. I mean, just look at the other first and second round picks. I'm going to go through them for you. So let's start in 2013. Tom Telesco's first year drafting as the GM. DJ Fluker and Manti Te'o in rounds 1 and 2, not great. He hit on Keenan Allen, obviously, but that's in the third round. We're going to get to the late draft. Jason Verrett, Jeremiah Tauchu, neither of those guys. Melvin Gordon, he actually traded up to draft the running back, Melvin Gordon. Denzel Perriman, not on the team anymore, but he did perform pretty well while he was on the Chargers, so I'll say that's a good one. Joey Bosa, Hunter Henry, nice. Mike Williams, average. Not was he worth the first round pick? No. Forrest Lamp never really played in the NFL much. Derwin James, pretty good. Uchenna Nwosu didn't stick around on the team for long. Jerry Tillery, awful. Really, really bad. Nasir Adderley, terrible. And now this is where we start to get a trend here. Justin Herbert was amazing. Kenneth Murray, you traded up to get him. A linebacker in the first round has not been great. Rashawn Slater was great. Asante Samuel Jr., the verdict is still out, man. Zion Johnson, round 1, verdict is still out there. And Quentin Johnston, Tuli Tuipulotu was a great pick. Quentin Johnston, not looking too great right now, but I'll say the verdict is still out because I want to give that man time because he has shown a lot of good stuff on tape and in training camp this past offseason. So you can see now that as good as Tom Telesco was at hitting some of those guys in the first and second round and getting some star players there, he was almost equally as bad and had a lot of misses in those first two rounds. But once you start looking past those first two rounds, then it looks a lot worse in terms of the drafting success for Tom Telesco. Just take a look at this. Now, 2013, let's just focus on the third round and later. Keenan Allen absolutely hit. None of these guys hit. And also the question right here in 2013, why do you draft a quarterback in the 7th round instead of a special teamer? This is when our special teams was awful, really, really bad, and we needed help there. Tevin Reese, none of these guys played in the NFL much. Craig Mager was a really big miss in the third round. Craig Mager was actually bowling at the time of the draft. He did not expect to get picked until late in day 3. That was a story that stuck out to me. And then right here, none of these guys really. Joshua Perry was another one that was a huge reach in the 4th round. And really look at these third round picks. Max Turk, Craig Mager, Chris Watt, all of these missed heavily. And it's not like these are late round picks either. The third round is where you get really good depth on your team. None of these guys have hit. Jatavis Brown was good for 1 year. We never really re-signed him. Dan Feeney wasn't great. Rashawn Jenkins, oh my God. Desmond King was a good one. That was his first real hit later on in the draft. Kaiser White was another hit later on in the draft in round 4, but you let him walk in free agency and then go to the Eagles, and he had so much success over there on an extremely low contract. And the Chargers really needed help at linebacker. I know it says right here he was drafted as a safety, but he played linebacker in the NFL, and it was a huge mistake to let him walk, especially for such little money. And then you keep going. Drew Tranquill was pretty good at linebacker. You let him walk too to the Kansas City Chiefs for extremely low money, and now he's playing pivotal snaps for them, and he's probably going to go to the Super Bowl, and I hope he's not going to freaking win it because I don't want the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. We can agree on that, right, Chargers and Raiders fans? You look later on in the draft here, Alohi Gilman hit. None of these guys. Trey McKitty, really, really bad. The verdict is still out on Josh Palmer, man, honestly, too, because he just gets injured so much. JT Woods in the 3rd round, this guy's not even really going to play any meaningful snaps for the Chargers, I think, because he was one of Staley's guys, and now that Staley is gone, it's an uphill battle for JT Woods right now. And you can see the late round success and misses. It's a lot more misses, and that was the main problem on this team. If you are a Chargers fan and you really kept up to date with what the Chargers roster was looking like, you always had top end talent and some elite players, but underneath that, you had no depth at all. And once you started to get injuries, because Tom Telesco frequently drafted players that had injury history, they kept getting injured in the NFL. Once those guys get injured, you have nothing underneath them because you are so top heavy and you have no real backup plan, no course of action to take if something goes wrong with one of the very few players that you have on your team, and one of the very few good players, elite players you have on your team. And once you build a roster like that, you have very little room to navigate around issues that come up. The other thing that Tom Telesco did really well was negotiating contracts with ripcords in them so that he didn't have to commit in case something went wrong during the duration of that contract. And that was typically through free agency, sometimes re-signing star players like Keenan Allen, like Mike Williams. Both of those guys have ripcords this season, in this offseason, and you can cut one of those guys or trade them and get a lot of that money off the books. But a reason why he was doing that so often is because look at the cap hell that the Chargers are in right now. Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and I'm going to lump Derwin James in here. These are 5 guys that are getting over $20 million a season. Justin Herbert getting $20 million. You got to pay your quarterback, so I'm not, saying that's Tom Telesco's fault at all. And then you have big money guys like Eric Kendricks and Corey Linsley as well. Trey Pipkins, the right tackle, we're paying him almost $9 million a season now, and he is the weakest link on this offensive line. So you have all of these players that are getting paid so much money. I think it's something crazy. Like, you can see the percentage of the cap that it takes up just going from here and up. Let me just do the math very quickly. 81.79% of the cap is just right here with these few players. How are you going to build a successful roster when you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys, just 8 guys that don't see the field as much? Joey Bosa, Mike Williams, Derwin James, all struggled with injuries a lot. Keenan Allen even struggled with injuries this season. You have almost 82% of the cap on these few guys that are not entirely seeing the field week to week. That is not the way that you build a roster. And then you add on top of that the fact that Tom Telesco was signing guys like, let's not forget JC Jackson. He is still going to be getting like $20 million a year for the next few years for the Chargers, and he's not even on the team. And he even apologized to the team because he signed them. And also, don't forget about guys like Derek Cox, Ryan Bulaga, and then letting guys walk in free agency that you could have signed for cheap and had depth on this team. Actual depth that you lacked your entire tenure as a GM. Guys like Adrian Phillips walking for very little money to the Patriots. Kaiser White, like we already talked about. Drew Tranquill, that would have really helped this defense. 3 guys that would have elevated this defense. Every single one of them would have. And also, I'd like to add on to that none of those guys had injury issues. And the guys that you are signing that are star players that you're prioritizing, a lot of them do. So if you're a Raiders fan, that's what you have to look forward to. Maybe a couple star players added to your team. Don't expect a lot of trades unless it's trading up for a running back, something like that in the first round. And then in free agency, not a lot's going to be happening, but you're going to get some ripcords with some guys. And then you're probably going to have a lot of injuries on that team. So if you're a Raiders fan, hope you're happy with Tom Telesco. I actually really genuinely want to know what Raiders fans have to say about Tom Telesco. But thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to have a video as soon as Jim Harbaugh gets hired. Make sure to bolt up and watch this if you want to see everything that you need to know about the Jim Harbaugh operation.